Right. So I am Sharmishta. I am conducting the session in behalf of Child Chapter today. And our topic is, of course, prevention of child abuse. And the speaker who would honor today all three of you, but Ami, you're going to go first. I'm going to introduce Ami. It's a long introduction, so I have to refer to my notes. So Ami, she was 3. When she was 3, she knew she wanted to be a doctor. In 4th grade, she fantasized about being a brain surgeon, and in high school, she wanted to be an anesthesiologist. After watching her mom die of cancer, she was only 20, and her life went an entirely different direction. She spent most of the next 10 years chronically ill until finally healing through fitness, nutrition, and meditation. Through this experience, she rediscovered a passion for healing and received 16 certifications in mind-body wellness. She offers mindfulness-based coaching training in leadership, well-being, and emotional intelligence. She started McCae.com, which obviously will be featured later on with her whole details, and www.mindfulnessleadercoach.com. Mm-hmm. I hand over the mic to you, the metaphorical mic to you now, Ami. And
I thank you very much. I thank you all for getting us together. So can I screen share? Is that all right? I connected with Gunasekara on LinkedIn. I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn. So I was blessed to meet him. And I just felt, I don't know, I was looking at his website, and I'm a mom, a single mom with 2 kids, and you have a 19-year-old and a 10-year-old. I'll share a couple stories about them as well that kind of helped me figure out what I could say today. Because I thought, boy, I just said, yeah, let me help you. I said, I'll volunteer. What do you need? And he didn't really say anything. And then he said, well, I'm going to put together this talk. And I thought, all right, I'll talk. I love to talk. I'm sure I can come with something to say, right? And then I thought, oh crap, what the heck was I thinking? I don't have, I have a skill set and I have children, but do I really have something that I can say here, here's what we need to do, and here's going to solve the world's problems or whatnot? I don't have that, but I have some stories, I have some ideas, and I have a skill set, and I want to share that. And I hope that will maybe inspire, and I don't know, get people at least talking, right? We're going to talk, we're going to share ideas and see where we're at. So I had some statistics I wanted to share with you. I'll tell you the couple points I wanted to make in regards to things were like, I was in an abusive marriage for, up until 7 years ago. So I think sometimes don't think that I don't think that we always look at the impact that has on children. I kept saying I was staying for my children, and it wasn't. Again, this is where awareness comes in. That's so important. Is I saw a post on Facebook, and it was this woman telling her story of being in an abusive relationship. And I went, oh crap, that's me. I didn't even know. So this is where talking about it and saying, here's signs and here's things. But I didn't have the resources and the things to leave. And I did finally find that. But there's a lot of things that some research I was doing on this said, some of the behaviors we see in children, and there's different ones for different ages, aren't related because the children are the problem. The problem is the parents and the relationship the parents are having. So I think it's important when we're thinking about what's going on with a child, instead of trying to fix a child, let's look at the environment the child's in. So that's a point I wanted to make sure I made. Then I also, I had a situation occur last summer. So I went to my girls and I, again, I'm a single mom. My girls they're 19 and 10 right now. We were going to go on vacation. So I had let them stay home that day. Oh, is it going to let me share? I was going to let them stay home that day, and I did let them stay home, and I went to work, and they were supposed to get some laundry done, and it was just, we were getting ready to go on vacation. So with that, I came home and they hadn't done the things that they were supposed to do. They were supposed to do laundry and get the house semi picked up and whatever. Well, I was a bit frustrated. I was an angry mom. and mad that these children hadn't done anything, what they were supposed to do. So I started getting things ready. I started doing the laundry, and I handed my, she was 9 at the time, the eggs in the fridge. I'm like, we're leaving town, so I want you to take these to the neighbor. They're going to go bad. I don't want them to go to waste. Well, in that next door, from the time she left my house, and I live in a very low crime part of the city, she came back in and said, someone just tried to take me. Someone tried to get me to get in their car. And I went, holy crap. Like, what do you mean? All you do is take eggs to the neighbor. Did you tell Kathy? Like, what the heck happened? And I didn't even know what to do. I was so panicked. I called the non-emergency number, and I said, hey, I don't know, my daughter's saying someone just tried to take her out of my yard. All she was doing. And they're like, you need to call 911. That's an emergency. They could be trying to pick somebody else up. So again, here was an example of child abuse that I don't think we always think about, how many children are taken. And again, I have some statistics if I get those slides pulled up, but it was the amount of children that disappear in the world in a year is incredible. And like, there were some statistics on domestic violence. There's like 20,000 calls a day. It's enormous. It's these amazing, ridiculously terrible statistics on what goes on in the world in regards to domestic violence and children being taken. And then the more research I did in regards to children being taken, a lot of it was like, my situation was my daughter, and she had nightmares. Like, it was like 3 days. I mean, it was, and then us trying to reestablish I couldn't even let her take out the trash. Like, it was really a frightening thing that you could literally just be in your front yard and someone could grab your child. But it looks like the statistics are actually showing that it's not strangers, it's the other parent or family member or something that does this. So I was like, holy crap. I mean, here we go back to, again, what is going on in these households with adults in these families are the core of the problem, not the children. And maybe not even, there's obviously child predators. Again, we had another situation just a month ago that the police officer, oh, go ahead. Was there a message?
Yeah, try sharing the screen now.
Let me see. Yeah, no, it still doesn't let me.
You were in a flow, that's why I don't want to disturb. So I just raised hand.
Yeah, it won't let me share it still. It has it's a strange, I've never had this screen, so I don't know why.
We're fascinated by your story anyway. So
yeah, well, thank you.
So yeah.
I appreciate it. So there's another story, and then I'll tell you some things I know about things that might help, maybe. So about a little bit over a month ago, my ex-husband lives in another city, a suburb of where I'm at, and there's a police officer that lives 2 houses down the street from him. So a little over a month ago, we watched, my 10-year-old watched 12 FBI agents overtake his house and arrest him. He ended up being arrested for distribution of child pornography, and now there's been other reports. He's been charged with like 2 other reports in that. I'm trying not to really follow the story enough to be, I want to be aware, but I don't want to get sucked into it and panic and whatever. So I'm always trying to find this balance between what do I know and what do I do to protect myself and my children. But again, this was another example. Here's this, this family was at my house for my 19, when she graduated high school last year. We had a party at the house, and that whole family was here, and they have pictures of them together. And there were all these thoughts like, are there pictures of my daughter? How often she's been in the house? Because she's been at her dad's. I don't even know. So again, this is another level of abuse that's going on. That, are we paying attention? And how would we have known the signs to that? And I end up having to have some really difficult conversations with my 10-year-old about this. So I wanted to bring attention to that as well. And again, like the child sex trafficking thing appears to be a lot of relatives. When I did the research, and I made a bunch of calls to local organizations, and then I did a bunch of, and if you guys want, I'll send my slides to you if you want the resources and stuff. And since I can't get them to show here, but I'd be happy to send those slides and statistics and give anybody access to them. I can just give you a Google Drive link. But it was a really horrible thing. She said, he's a police officer, he's supposed to protect us. And so we have this, supposed to be member of society that's protecting in children too, and he had 3 daughters. They're 9, 7, and 4. So fortunately, he's in jail, and that's probably going to be a long, drawn-out process. But again, it brought awareness to me about the types of different abuse. So I just wanted to share indirect things that we're not always seeing, and maybe some of them are direct to some people. I don't know. My focus in my business is on mindfulness. And the reason I focus on that is that it changed my life, for one. And there's some science. So mindfulness just means, like, at its simplest, it just means to pay attention on purpose to the present moment and do so without judgment. So you can do this in a million different ways. It can be breathing. It can be sending yourself some loving kindness. It could be somebody else. It could be sights. It could be sounds. It could be sensations. It's not, you don't have to be a monk. Like, I'm trying to streamline that. You don't have to be a monk on a mountain chanting Om to pay attention, to just notice, in that moment. And there's some really, really amazing science. If you guys, if you practice meditation, mindfulness-based practices, we know for a fact, things like affect labeling, we call it mindful emotion. So it's naming the emotion. And I don't know how many people can see my screen, but if you can't see me, I'm raising my hand. And this is called name it to tame it. So your amygdala is this part of your brain. So if you put your hand behind your head and you tilt your head back, your amygdala is right about there. And that's the fight, flight, or freeze response. So that's the stress part of the part of the brain that regulates stress. But if you imagine it's on your hand, imagine your wrist is your brain stem and your amygdala is like at the palm of your hand. And if you put your thumb in and fold your hand over, this is your cortex, this part, and then the top of your hand. And then the very front here of your knuckles is your prefrontal cortex. And that's where your forehead is. So we know, right in the middle, this is the brain center you want to operate with. This is where we're visionary leaders. This is creativity and intuition and morale. And there's 9, neuroscience says there's 9 aspects of well-being that are developed through practices like mindfulness-based stimulation that deactivate the amygdala and allow you access. Because if your amygdala, think about it, if you are scared or you're angry, you can't just get out of it, right? Like, you've got to do something to shift. And we know that things like name it to tame it, name what you are feeling, begins to rewire that. And there's a phrase with these scientists that study this, that neurons that fire together wire together. So the more you practice something like that and more practice mindfulness-based stuff, the easier time or the more natural time it begins that you begin to use your prefrontal cortex. This is the capacity, basically, instead of emotionally reacting to something, to consciously choose, right? And that's what we want people to do, right? If people had a higher levels of morale or weren't so stressed or anxious or afraid or whatever it is, that gets them in a position to choose. Now, my intention is always to say, hey, take 2 minutes and practice the pause. Or if you guys take anything from this, practice the pause. Take 2 minutes. Think about it. If you sent 2 minutes before you sent that email or text, I don't know one person that hasn't sent a text they regretted ever, like it happens, 2 minutes. Pay attention to your breath. A body scan is another common thing. It can be difficult to ease into that. There's some trauma-based body scans you can do if you have a history of trauma, because sometimes people tuning in their body can be a very frightening thing. So I suggest the simplest way is just to kind of scan your head to your toes or toes to your head or something like that. But you can also do, like when I drive, I feel anxious and overwhelmed when I drive. It's overstimulating to me. So I just sense my hands. So you could sense your hands. You could sense your feet. You can do this when you're walking. This is another way to get grounded and be here instead of, I'm forgetting what it's called, but there's this midline of your brain. And basically, if you're not directing, it's directing you. It's got you in the past, worried about, feeling bad about the past or being afraid of the future. But you have the capacity to manage that. Because a lot of times people are reacting. It's like 80% of the time your reaction is something from the past. It's not about what's going on. So if you could deal with what's going on in front of you right now without the past crap and the worry of the future, there's the potential for a little bit better, and a little bit better goal. End result, I think. So I want to bring up another thing is that emotional intelligence piece is something I focus on, and that empathy is one of those 9 aspects of well-being that's developed through mindfulness-based practices. So empathy is the capacity to feel somebody else's emotions. We're technically all wired to be able to do that. It's because of mirror neurons. There's science there. What happens is that we don't have we have crappy boundaries. That's what causes a problem when empathy is not working and you're taking on somebody else's stuff. That's just crappy boundaries. Again, that's a self-awareness thing, and mindfulness will help you develop higher levels of self-awareness. So empathy, how we understand empathy is, so you have this ability to feel a person's feelings. And when you feel that, what you feel is compassion. So you are moved to feel compassion, and then that compassion drives you to act, to do something about it. You want to relieve somebody's suffering. The average person does. And I'm not referring to people that are mentally ill. Narcissists are something I think we need to have more conversations about, and how do we deal with that, those people in society and in homes. So empathy is this really beautiful thing. So, and it allows you to actually have compassion for yourself too, which I think sometimes missing. If people are in abusive situations or doing abusive things, they're obviously lacking empathy and self-compassion. And that's something that could be, it could be something that be developed. So my suggestion with all of this is, let's bring awareness to all the things. What if we took all of your skill set and all these other people, and we just started teaching classes, like teach in universities, teach in public school systems, teach, not just my stuff, but like, let's teach everything. Like, how do we teach kids confidence and boundaries and trust and obviously mindfulness and emotional intelligence? And let's teach parents. Like, when I went through a divorce, the support was awful. Like, I didn't have a good support system, not around me, not legally. The legal system was it was a horrible mess. And if you're a woman I'm trying to do something better for my kids. I find it took 3 times of me trying to get divorced before I finally stayed gone. And I did get a little bit of support. I went to something called the Women's Center for Advancement. It's here in Omaha. And I was in their 12-week class. It was for women that had been in domestic violence relationships, and it was in a women's empowerment class. And I don't know if I would have gotten through it with that, but I needed more. It wasn't enough. Like, it was an ongoing. I had panic attacks and there were lots of other things going on. And I know that I wasn't probably the best. I thought I was the best. I had left. I was free and things like that. So you think you are, but looking back 7 years later, I can tell you that my kids needed different things. I needed different things, and the systems aren't in place for that. So I have lots and lots of ideas on that. I am pro education. I'm working on a 17th or 18th certification. I'm obviously very pro education and pro supporting people. And I started offering a free weekly meditation. I don't care who can join it. I am so pro take a minute to yourself. It's secular, simple, short, guided, non-threatening. If you don't want to do the live, I'm recording the audio and you have access to the audio. So I'm always happy to email me. I'll share other recordings or direct you to resources if you don't want mine. I have lots and lots, but I think that I have 12,000 ideas on classes. And if we could all get together and share them in all the places we need, then maybe we get the support that these people need. And it starts with bringing that awareness. Like I said, I didn't even know that marriage I knew it wasn't right. It never felt right, but it wasn't until I saw that. And then there was an incident that occurred. I was like, oh yeah, this could be potentially deadly if I don't get out. So, and then all these other incidents show up. Like I said, with my poor 10-year-old, I feel terrible. 10-year-olds shouldn't have to, they should still be magical. They should not have to worry about the officer being arrested for things, and she shouldn't have to do that. So with that, I'll kind of wrap up. I'll share my slides or anything you guys would want at any time, and they have some.
From my notes, Dipashika, she is the Regional Manager, Asia at BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. She worked for Plan International as a project manager and national advisor. Dipashika is a skilled and compassionate professional and an author. Hi, Dipashika. The metaphorical mic is yours. You have about 10 to 15 minutes to talk about prevention of child abuse.
Hi, Mr. Thanks a lot for the nice introduction. First of all, let me know, is my line clear?
Yeah, it is. It is good. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. Sure. Thank you. And I mean, it was so interesting, your talk, and I think focusing on family unity is something that I always do, after working in the holistic approach. I think that's very effective. Just a note before going into the presentation. I'm going to project my slides now. We know it's successful. Do you see the slides? Are the slides visible?
Yes, ma'am.
I can see that.
Perfect.
Oh, great. First of all, I would like to thank Jakir for inviting me for this webinar. And also, I would like to thank Child Chapter for organizing this event. I think this is a timely event, especially Sri Lanka have this issue, child abuse, and it has been exacerbated with COVID and working from home, things like that. Actually, this is vast area, so I was thinking, what should I talk about today in 10 minutes? It was so challenging. Finally, I came into this question. Do you have what it takes to prevent child abuse in a rapidly digitalizing world? Here, utilizing is something that as development, we always, advocate, we influence for digitalization. But the issue with, if I look back last 2-3 years, I think with COVID and working from home and isolation, distancing, all that, happening digitalization rapidly so fast has become kind of a challenge, and it has given us a lot of impact, especially for children and youth, a lot of effects as well as positive effects. So this is going to talk about. I'm Deepashika Gunasekara. I'm not going to explain about that given my introduction. Thank you very much for that. Actually, we heard a lot of negative stories in Sri Lanka, especially with related to use of internet and use of social media, smartphones, and all these digitalizing and COVID was like hand in hand in last few years. So, parents beating children for not studying, and children, a lot of suicide cases in Sri Lanka in many parts of the year, in North, South, I think even in India and in several countries around us. I'm not sure Europe, America, and other countries with COVID, but I assume that it is the case for them as well. But especially in Sri Lanka and in countries around us, we heard a lot of stories like this, what you see in the screen. Some, digital use related incidents in recent past. If you ask why, I think as practitioners, we always go into policy, legal frameworks, systems and protocols, technology, and all, vertical up to top to bottom and bottom to top kind of approaches. But at the same time, considering the few decades where I was in the development and education sector, finally I'm thinking a lot about the family unit. So Amit's experience in the first step was so close to my heart, actually, because what I also believe is what we can do at family level is a lot more than the society or thinking it large. I'm not saying policy, legal frameworks and other things are not important, it's equally important, but at the same time, when the change happens so fast, it takes a lot of time, for legal frameworks and systems to come in, but at family level, we can do a lot. So I'm going to focus today's discussion, as well as recently when I did write-ups and even recent book, what I did was mostly about what we can do at family level and what parents can do and what skill set parent needs to have to tackle these issues, including the prevention of abuse. I don't think this picture is very nice because it's crossing faces and all that. Maybe I will have to improve this. I could come across with the little time I had to prepare this slide. What we need to emphasize here is if you take the child means usually the standard what we accept all over the world is 0 to 18 years. So 18 years is a long time, isn't it? It's nearly 2 decades. So the child is growing and they are, improving the knowledge, and with internet and social media and all technology around us, it is, knowledge improvement is pretty fast. And they are stepping from one generation to another so fast. And also, their knowledge of technology is improving so fast. I am like, for most of the time, I have been in the IT sector, tech industry, so I know how much fast it's moving, and that affects children, their behavior, their attitude, and the relationship they make, and everything. But what happened to the parent? Parent is not growing in that the same speed. So it's always kind of a gap in between the child and the parent. When the child is growing, this gap, becomes more, and so that becomes an issue. So that's why the parent needs to grow, and parent needs to be skillful, parent needs to be knowledgeable, that the parent needs to think about, growing and having a growing mindset. If you go into physical abuse, if you go slightly one by one, physical abuse with COVID, in the recent context, we know that the situation has been exacerbated. COVID brought school, society, and playground home. More stressed children due to distancing, isolation, and fear of COVID and future. And sickness, death, and death of parents, caregivers, and most of all, I think, in the parents in our society, especially in Sri Lanka, the biggest issue they have is screen contact time. TV, internet, social media, gaming. What is standard? What is suitable? And is it 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, or 10 hours? Should they be in internet at daytime, or is it night? Is it all right to be awakened in the morning? And things like that. Parents are not aware what to accept and what to not accept. So these kind of things. And I would like to here, stress just one point, because there are so many areas under physical abuse. But what strikes me mostly here, culturally also with the Sri Lankan system, and mainly in the eastern part of the world, physical abuse and punishment is, very difficult to distinguish in between. Physical abuse is defined as punishment, and punishment is considered as something happening for the good of the child. It is to teach the child good and bad. So punishment is happening, whether it's not formal, official or unofficial. It's happening in school, it's happening at home, it's happening everywhere. Even in universities, it's happening. So that is kind of that myth, maybe a belief or kind of attitude of people towards punishment is bringing issues for the child. It's good for the adult, but it is bad for the child. So there will be suggestions for other panelists as well, what we can do about it. The few suggestions what I can give from my exposure and experience is alternatives to punishment. To teach them to learn from mistakes, catch them when they do good things, rather than catching them when they do bad things. Respond to the cause of the problem and not to the problem. something like that, But what I want to emphasize here is not the list of things to do, but the parent needs to develop the skill set, how to handle this. Why we do punishment? Because it is shortcut. If you don't have time, if you want to discipline the child, and if you don't know alternatives, then we do punish. But then learning and building up skill to do alternatives taking time. So that's what I want to emphasize. Let's go to sexual abuse. Again, knowledge gap between parent and child. Due to the technology differences, the gap is becoming increased. Lack of knowledge about safety in internet. The knowledge of parents as well as children about how to use internet safely. Lack of knowledge about genders. I think this makes the child, especially like adolescents or like children at bigger age groups, get so much stressed in our cultures, because with the internet and with social media and with relationships now they have through internet, they get exposed to different genders in the world and different sexual orientations. But in society with adults with previous generations, it's like male and female, and gender through biological sexual setup or sexual organs of people, and male marry female, female marry male. So but there's a different broad discussion in the world about genders and sexual orientation. So the child actually, they can't figure out, should we discuss this with parents? What do they think? And they don't know anything about it. So these kind of things. So they are very much stressed. And if you take a single person, single child, they themselves are worried, what gender do I have? And is it wrong if I get attracted to this particular person? Things like that. Lack of knowledge about generations and relationships. We belong to different generations because, naming different people will have, different ideas, but we belong into, different kinds of generation that have different profiles, So without understanding those generations, like we say, like X generation, Y, Z, and, another generation is going to come. So without understanding those kind of things, because some parents, they belong to a generation, and in between the parent and the child, in between also there is a generation. So a lot of differences, So without understanding these kind of differences, it's very difficult. A parent find it difficult to find solutions to these kind of things, and also to prevent abuse, because abuse relates to the knowledge children have about these kind of things. Mainly what I want to bring here is child has feelings too when it comes to sexual abuse. That is what adults always forget, because they don't have the exposure most of the time about these genders and generations and newer concepts, and where the youngsters going through. So suggestions, be age sensitive. I think age sensitive approach is very much needed in here. Most of the parents I know, like my friends and relatives and the friends in the society or other people that I talk to, majority, they don't concern when responding, they don't concern the age differences. The response to a child of 8 years old will be the same response to a child of 12 or 30. But they begin puberty in 12 and 13, and they start getting feelings by themselves. So they get attracted to opposite sex or any other, whatever, depending on the sexual orientation they have. So these kind of things. And spotting signs, before we are talking about prevention today. So the knowledge of parents about signs before something happens. A lot of things are seen beforehand in advance of the critical issue by the child if you really notice and if you know how to notice. I'm not saying being a parent, I also don't know most of the things. I mean, I'm learning day to day. So my suggestion is that parent needs to learn these things. And empowering the child, because you can't go behind the child all the time. Child needs to be independent as well. Knowledgeable and friendly parent at home. So again, I'm focusing on the family unit and thinking about these suggestions. There will be other suggestions as well coming in today. Emotional, psychological abuse. A working from home parent with the current context, children's school playgrounds came home as mentioned earlier, parents overlook studies and homework, which is like very stressful for children, and COVID and sicknesses and things. Financial issue is becoming the most frequent or mostly talked about impact coming into our families now. Uncertainty about future is another bigger thing. So with that, children are already stressed. And with those conditions, actually parents have to think about solving the issues. So again, be age sensitive, spotting signs, and these kind of suggestions I would give. And then finally, if you go into neglect, online platforms are vital for education. So children are kind of separated in the house and parent is separated in the house. So they are in the house, but they are, busy with their platforms and technologies and tools in hand. Virtual, the community and the recreation, everything has become virtual. So their relationship, physical contact and things like that has been, kind of vanished. Increased mental issues among children and adults. This is becoming, I think as you said, like if you look into statistics of this, what I hear is what we see in terms of statistics is the rates of mental issues have drastically grown for both adults and children during the COVID period. So with all those things, the focus for health and mental health is another thing, because you can't solve everything maybe by yourself when it comes to parents. So parents need to know like where the helplines are there, to whom to talk, and he's talking good, having some kind of a pool around you to talk to, things like that. So that kind of a skill or arrangement parent needs to have. Finally, I again like to bring back this growth model. What I want to emphasize in these few minutes is that adults need to grow. Adults need to learn and grow. We need to change our attitude. If we are looking at prevention of child abuse in today's world, in a rapidly digitalized world, we need to think of learning. We need to think of getting more knowledge. More knowledge means learning and unlearning as well. And also practice by practicing, improving the skills or being expertised in the field or whatever the subject areas needed, as we talked in other slides. So finally, your child is smart nowadays and they grow. If you want to grow, be a digitally smart parent. We need the technology also. That's what I want to emphasize. Thank you very much.
Today, she is Karina Murray, and Karina is an ambassador, an advocate, and an innovator. She has played many important roles with great success. She is the CEO and matriarch of Aunua. Is it how you pronounce it, Karina?
Aunua, yes, close.
Aunua, Global Academy Heroes in Africa. Her inspiration to create a community for Aunua has been inspired by so many others that have allowed her to see through their eyes what's possible when we bridge worlds together. and we bridge, and connect hearts and minds, thus enabling us to be the global community of game changers. And that's what you are. The formation of Anna was inspired by fears for her own children's future and influenced by her passion for promoting her personal growth and development. She is a qualified and accredited NLP practitioner, scholarship winner, and attendee at the Entrepreneurs Institute in Bali, founding member of the Genius School, affiliated with Roger James Hamilton's movement aiming to ignite the genius in every child. Trained, creative, and artisan, she says that I spent 3 formative years studying art, fashion, and design. Ambassador with is it Beluga?
Yes, that's
a social learning platform that has been featured in Forbes and the BBC. She has collaborated with professionals from the political, health, and educational spheres and engages experts from all walks of life to birth Onwa. The mic is yours.
You know, this is it's so lovely. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction and for inviting me to be here today as well. So I'm so grateful. And you know, it's I don't have a presentation today. I just thought I'd wing it like Amy. I loved your talks, girls. I think it's really really important, these conversations, and you know, I think it's the more we talk about these things, it's the more we can open up our minds to what's possible and how we can explore different ways of doing things, you know. When I looked at, you know, the whole topic of this about prevention, I looked at it from a different, I suppose, a different perspective and a different way, thinking, you know, how do we prevent children from struggling and suffering in such a way, because we've got such a lot of our kids are growing up in such uncertain times where, you know, there's such a lot of fear surrounding them, and I think it's affecting all of us, and it has been over the last while and for many decades. I look back and talking about stories from many years ago. My own mother suffered with an abusive father, and she had you know, he was an alcoholic and a gambler, and my grandmother was a wonderful woman who I so looked up to and so admired, and she was a tailoress, and she worked so hard to keep my mom in a convent school, because her little brother, her son, my mom's little brother, was taken away from her when he was small by her husband, who was abusive. He took her son away, and she didn't see him for many years. And I look at the life that my mom had, and without her brother for so many years, and they do have that relationship now. But you know, how these things really help. I suppose they shape you to who you are, and they kind of really teach you a lot of things about, you know, about who you are and what you're capable of doing. I think years later, there was a lot of situations where my grandmother had to go and find her son again, and she got back with her abusive husband because she wanted to be with her son. But you know, I'm deviating a bit here, but I do relate to, I know that story of my mother's past and how it did affect her many years can really kind of ripple through all the years that have to come, you know. So so many women are really struggling, and so many people really are, and it's those cries for help that we very often, we don't know, you know, looking for those signs and those symptoms and looking out for those signs are really, really important for us to be aware of them. And how do we help and reach out and really support people that are struggling? Looking at the angle that I really wanted to talk about today and talk about is about with Anua and the work that I do with kids. It's all about empowering young people, giving them a voice and giving them an opportunity to really, you know, nurture their abilities to step up and be heard. And I think this is what's really important. that so many young people are suffering in with mental health or physical or whatever their situation is at home. In very often, in a lot of cases, their situations, they can't speak and they feel they don't know who to turn to, who to talk to. And, where do these children go? Who do they go and speak to? And how can we really step in and help these kids? I think that when we look back and see, well, all of the education that, we're instilling on these kids and how much the educational system has changed, really there hasn't been a lot of changes. And I think that now is the time that we really need to start looking at ways of creating programs, looking to schools, supporting schools, giving them resources, and saying we need to put before every subject on the curriculum, we need to look at the mental health of these kids and how we're going to support them and give them skill sets and tools that are going to help them to be able to communicate best and be able to understand how they're going to tap in and deal with what they're dealing with, and how they're going to understand how to see the signs in other children and be able to step up as those great leaders and supportive leaders and be able to have a better understanding of other people. I think that it's really important to look at education and really hone in on how can we start looking at even our local schools and looking at these programs and how we can actually help support and give, we really need to change a lot in schools. I think this is the one place and the one environment that our kids are actually in that environment and they are learning. And curriculum, we all know that the curriculum that they're learning now is not going to set them up for the future that they're facing unless we're going to look at the core, most important thing that they all have, and that's their wellness, their mental health, and their ability to deal with life and what life's throwing at them and all those challenges and be resilient. So I suppose, I think that listening to Amy as well, listening to her talk about mindfulness and the importance of that. I have this jar in my room, actually, you might be familiar with. My daughter did mindfulness in a friend of mine's house, and it's really powerful. This jar, when you look inside, this is literally got lots of glitter, water, and little bits and beads and stuff. And my good friend did a really amazing exercise on my daughter, teaching her how to be still her mind, and I think that we do very often, we're all like this because our minds are so full of so many thoughts and fears and so many different things. We need to settle those things, those thoughts, to really be able to have more clarity and be able to settle, with a greater sense of peace, that we can actually focus more on how we're going to get through that moment rather than looking back and procrastinating about the past and the future and the racket that we get ourselves into. It's so important that, we teach mindfulness and, compassion, empathy, and those amazing qualities, those amazing skills are very often have to be taught because a lot of our kids are in homes that don't get those things, and parents are under pressure, they're stressed, there's so many things that they're dealing with, and these kids are listening. And imagine we were able to teach these kids these amazing skill sets and leadership skills and teach them psychology. Imagine that was a subject on the curriculum, psychology. Imagine kids actually learned about psychology. How do I deal with my mom or my dad if my mom is struggling with anxiety, and how am I going to deal with that situation because I'm at the brunt of the other side of dealing with how do I worry if I'm worrying about her, how are we going to deal with the situation? Imagine teaching that to a child, how they help their parent get through that, and the wisdom that's in these kids, and these kids being able to understand, how do I communicate how I'm feeling? How am I going to express this to somebody else? Or how do I identify another child in the classroom who's struggling at home? How am I going to be empathetic? My own child was sick when she was she's 11 years old, and she was sick for nearly 8 months, and she missed so much school, and there was nobody there in school to support her. She missed a lot of school. She was sick for some time, but nobody knew how to express that to her. Nobody knew how to communicate with her. She was you know, she found it was such a difficult time, and it really had a huge impact on her. She's homeschooled now when she's loving it, but it is a case of that there's so much we can teach these kids, you know, and really we need to start there. And the one place we can do that is in school. That's the one place we can capture all these kids' attention and teach them how to be these amazing, beautiful little people that we need, these leaders that we need in our world today, leading with love, empathy, kindness, compassion. We can have a very different world. But talking about prevention, that's where we need to start. You know, I really feel that would be powerful if we could just do that part. But I'm waffling on a bit. Sorry. But yes. So thank you for giving me the time to talk today. And it's good to be here with you all. So thank you.
Thank you. So Linda is an international youth and community consultant with 30 plus years of experience, pioneer of love and laughter holistic healing workshops. She has led in disaster zones, prisons, orphanages, war regions. She is a dramatist, writer, and musician. She is passionate about people, love, developing the potential of all, especially children and young people. Currently chairperson of Sun4 Global Federation International Children's Wing 2021, working for the 17 UN SDGs to connect children, celebrating diversity, and generally working towards making the world a more compassionate, just, and loving place. Combining her varied experience, she has developed creative therapeutic methods of working with young people and their communities to heal past hurts and move young people into a positive and hopeful future using drama, art, music, games, and storytelling techniques for adults and young people. She offers love and laughter workshops which enable participants to relive some of the joy of youth, to raise self-esteem and self-confidence with some active planning to give courage to face the future and tools to deal with past hurts and move on.
Thank you so
The
much.
mic is yours.
Thank you. Hope you can hear okay. It's a bit noisy where I am. If I can just try and share my screen.
Yes, ma'am, you can.
Okay. So I'm hoping you can see that.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm looking at the aspect of child strengthening, which actually was mentioned before as well. So basically, I don't want to go too much into what is child abuse because I think other speakers have covered that. The only thing I wanted us to have a look at, as well as the breadth of types of abuse, which again we've mentioned, but we're now looking globally. We're all representatives of different countries, and the world is a very small place at the moment. You know, coronavirus has shown that, the fluidity between countries. And one of these things needs to be also how we tackle child abuse. So we have worldwide issues where children are trafficked across, and I think that possibly hasn't been mentioned yet. This is just for those of people watching on video as well. This is something that I like to look at just in terms of working out what we actually think abuse is. We were talking a bit, Sri Lanka is an interesting situation because I've been told if I complain about physical violence, some people have said to me, oh, that's because you're Western. I said, actually, no, it's illegal in Sri Lanka also. But exactly what was said before about that children it's normal for a child to be beaten as a form of punishment. And therefore, there's a kind of sense that if you don't beat the child, you're spoiling them. So we have to look at what is meant by abuse. So this is an exercise really for people to think about themselves and as a discussion point, because you won't really be able to get a total answer. But what in a list of types of physical contact or even sexual contact or even loving contact, what is abuse and where does it actually come? where you have at one extreme obvious abuse, rape and murder, child trafficking, all kinds of extreme kinds, but also on the other side, you've got different cultural issues, from if somebody just smacks somebody on the wrist or shouts at them, or if they hold them on their knee, if they're kissing them, what is okay in different cultures and what is abusive. And these kind of things, there's a whole set in the middle of grey area, which is really, really difficult. And this is why sometimes it's not as easy to deal with as we think, because there needs to be a discussion, even between workers, even between teachers, etc., or community workers. Is this an abusive situation? Because a lot of it, for example, a child being held on somebody's knee, you know, we're in danger in the West of banning all forms of love between people who are non-family because everybody's so terrified of sexual abuse. On the other hand, it is classically extended family and other people who do move into that sexual abuse. So we have to really look at the context, the impact on the child, and all those things. And there are many, many grey areas. So again, this is just a kind of massive list of things. If people wanted to have a go at that, using the webinar and sort of put it on pause and just have a discussion with people about which of these things are not ideal parenting, but not abusive, because again, we forget there's bad parenting, but that comes before abuse. There's non-ideal parenting, but there's also a next layer, which is actually abuse, moving into very serious kinds of abuse. So again, we need to look at it very wisely. So which of these things are abusive, which of them are grey areas, and which of them are actually perfectly fine? And in different areas, for example, you know, FGM, female genital mutilation, I've done some training with African partners, and that's a very, very big issue where one woman defended it and cut off the whole discussion about child abuse because she was offended that it was considered abusive. And yet, actually, when you look at the whole situation around FGM, you know, there is very little, well, there's nothing that's actually good about it, apart from the cultural implication that if you don't do it, you'll be cast out of that culture. And actually, that's not a positive thing. The male circumcision, there can be some health benefits, but the female circumcision is purely adulterating the female body for a cultural purpose, and therefore is considered internationally to be abuse. And one of the questions is, where does international rule take over from local culture? And trying to explain to some local cultures, and especially when they believe there's a religious or spiritual connection with that, actually sometimes it's very hard, because the misinformation that goes with that, people feel that you're criticizing their religion, when actually you come back, it's not just one religion that people are confused about with that. You come back to actually the text of the religion never mentions this kind of thing. It's something that's grown up. And again, some of this needs deconstructing. So that's just a kind of side exercise, but I think it's quite important that we remember there's lots of grey areas. So the main thing I want to talk about is child strengthening. And this is kind of, this is one exercise I do in my games, where you start with the kids sitting on the chairs and you gradually take them away. And it shows, you know, the strength of the children where everybody trusts each other. Actually, you don't need any other support. So it's a very visible, active sign. They love being part of this. And once they've seen the first group successfully do it, then everybody wants to try it. But until they see the first group, some are a bit suspicious. So this is the ideal children's place in the world. You have the child. The child is surrounded by the nuclear family. In theory, loving, caring for physical needs. The extended family is around that nuclear family, giving extra support. You then have a religion or cultural identity, which that family participates in, which gives extra support again. And around that is the community, a larger living area, the country and national laws that support the child, and finally the international guidance that's around all the world. So I just want to unpick this a little bit, because this is the ideal. This should be what's happening with our children. There should be multi-layered support all the way through, from the child individually all the way through the world. And it would be wonderful if that was the case. And in some cases, many children may actually have this positive experience. They feel safe, nurtured, and part of all these different layers and levels of support. Unfortunately, we know it doesn't always work that way. So I'm going to start now from the out and going in. So the international laws and policing, this is what we need as the outer structure holding everything together. So we have guidelines, United Nations guidance and bodies, UNICEF, the Convention on the Rights of the Child. We have that guidance. We have robust international laws. We don't always necessarily have international cooperation for policing and sharing information on paedophile rings and online abuse, which is needed because paedophiles are very clever and they move around. And in, for example, Sri Lanka, after the tsunami, I've been working here since 2005, shortly after the tsunami, there was a British guy, paedophile, who came and set up a children's home, and it took some time before people realized what he was doing. So again, the international information needs to be shared, and there are mechanisms for this, so it does happen, but sometimes it can take a long time, and sometimes people escape and evade that by changing their name. Again, explaining in different communities that international laws override cultural issues and national abuses. So again, in the, that every culture had certain things that were accepted as practice, such as the Chinese foot, where it was broken so that women took tiny little steps, which was in effect abusive, and it was shown that this was abuse, and that people came out of that. Now there's a big movement against FGM, but some cultures are still fighting it, and some national heads are fighting FGM, whereas the cultures within certain countries are still struggling. Sadly, even a lot of the women who had this done to them and were traumatized by that, somehow they've processed acceptance of that by saying, I had to do this, it's the right thing to do, it's painful, but we did it together in order to be part of this special culture. And people who are not circumcised, female circumcised, are excluded from jobs and from some things. I know, for example, in Sierra Leone and other places, despite the state trying to act about it. So we need to be able to give education all the way through. So again, child labor, child slavery, lack of female education. We know in Afghanistan, there's a really big issue about that culturally, with certain minority cultures enforcing that and trying to explain, actually, you can't do that legally, but you still have to fight through the levels of control that different communities have. Early marriage is a very big issue in many different cultures, and trying to rescue. I was working in some of the safe houses, which were in Sri Lanka, which were also housing young people who had run away together or had young marriage forced on them, and then the girls were taken and protected. And again, supporting INGOs. So the organizations who can actually reach across the countries and do good in different places, bringing expertise and training local people is very important. So the outer ring needs to be robust in order for the other things to fit into place. So again, we have the rights of the child, the main convention on the rights of the child. I won't go into too much detail, but there's lots and lots of resources online in different languages, and the Convention of the Rights of the Child is in many different languages, and they're very, very good resources and booklets that you can use for parents and for children, and activity packs as well. So many countries have their own, but also there's international ones with UNICEF and other places. So again, these look at the rights of the child, and part of what I do is also explaining to children that they have rights, and the most important right is to feel safe. And if they don't feel safe, what can they do to report? So again, these are just examples of particular countries as well that have developed different resources. So then the next level is the country and national laws. And again, different places, every country has difficulties in certain ways. Every country is trying to improve the way that it identifies and prosecutes child abuse in different ways. Again, speaking for Sri Lanka, there's a massive issue here about timely prosecutions. It's hard enough to get a prosecution because so often it's the child's word against an adult and other adults. So if it's a father or stepfather, the mother often supports the husband because they're scared if they tell the truth or sacrifice the husband, then they'll lose their breadwinner. And so it's very difficult in every country for them to be able to get prosecutions. But in Sri Lanka, it's taking between 10 and 20 years to get a prosecution. And one of my colleagues, I first went to work with the National Child Protection Authority in Sri Lanka. And one of my colleagues years later was summoned after changing jobs in order to go to court to try and present the evidence, which she couldn't remember. She had to go back and try and find notes from years back, that was 12 years after the fact. She wasn't paid to have that kind of time either. So the structures were really unhelpful. So again, child-friendly judicial methods, having video evidencing, which Sri Lanka does have, national information sharing so that there's police forces and so that, again, paedophiles are clever and will move around. There's a difference between somebody who's almost a professional paedophile versus family abuse, and that needs to be handled in different ways. Again, we looked at social media. Dipashika was talking about the online and digital education. Well, this is very important for young people now, and national bodies can get out quality media and social media education for children in different languages. Sri Lanka is not the only one that has multiple languages. So you need that in local languages, and it needs to be educating families and communities as well as the children. Part of that, again, we were saying a part of that protection is also education. The schools need robust education techniques and training for teachers, and that normally comes from the government, the Minister of State for Education and educational guidance. Strong guidance for child protection systems, mental health support for children, helplines, national helplines, and easy reporting, safe houses for victims, and a strong economy. A strong economy, we were talking again about coronavirus and how it actually impacts on violence within the family. So a strong economy is also part of descaling the stresses in the family. So you need all these levels need to come from the country level, the guidance, the support, the education, the mental health support, all the way to strong economy and pay scales. So you're actually supporting people's pay properly. And that's another way about saving children from child labor if you don't have that level of stress. So again, this is the Childline Sri Lanka 1929. This is the some different ones, one from Africa and Australia, and the India Childline 1098. So each one has to put their own advert and information forward. So the next one is the community. So again, that might be a village, it might be a town, it might be a language group. And again, in the community, there has to be easy access to education for boys and girls. There needs to be natural teaching for safety issues right from the ground up, right the way through school. It should start with feeling safe about your body. It should start with your body is your own, right from a very young age. We talked about sex education in one area in Sri Lanka years ago, and we were talking about the discussion was we should start sex education at 5 years old, and there physically nearly was a fight. And it kind of split on male-female side, where the men were saying, how dare you try to teach sex education at 5? And the women were saying, yes, we need to start that. But mainly it was a misunderstanding about what is sex education. It doesn't mean you teach about the mechanics of sex. It means you talk about areas of your body that are private, that people don't need to touch, that you have control, that if people make you feel uncomfortable, they don't have a right to do that, and it's okay to go and tell somebody you trust. That kind of thing we need to start right at the youngest age, so that people feel that sense of ownership of themselves and their body right from the beginning. So again, there needs to be safety issues, there needs to be good healthcare, there needs to be sensitive policing. Again, many police forces don't know how to police domestic violence and child abuse. They often end up punishing the woman. They often end up leaving the situation as it is, which if the child has reported something can make it very dangerous for the child. That's again a classic one. It's not just in Sri Lanka, it's in the West as well, where you get some gung-ho police officer trying to separate something and they're not really working out what's happening. And in the end, there's no solid evidence, so they leave it alone. But the community has seen a big issue going on. The family becomes stigmatized, and who's to blame? The child. And the child can be very much in danger in some of those situations. So there needs to be easy reporting procedures. How do you complain? Who does it go to? Who's going to pick up that information? Listening and respecting children, because a lot of the trouble with it is that people don't believe the child. I've had teachers in schools try and tell me that the child is lying about this, that, and the other. And I've been able to feel the difference. The child had no motive to lie. In fact, they had everything against them to lie because they were going to be ostracized. They were in danger. It was frightening for them. Whereas the teacher trying to back themselves and back other professionals had much more reason to lie. So actually, we need to be listening and respectful to our children. We need safe houses. What happens when somebody's vulnerable? Like even that situation where the police weren't sure how to act, if they can take away that family for a moment while they work out what's going to happen, put them somewhere safe. That's a really, really important way to then diffuse the situation and keep everybody safe while you look into it. So, okay, I'll just whiz through. So you can see that the important things again are about the communication between all the different agencies working. So again, for workers, we look at these different ways of raising that discussion and using every opportunity to do that. There's different posts in languages. In religion and culture, it's really important that there's safe places of worship and that religions and cultures are not seen as above child abuse, because we know, certainly from all sorts of different issues that have come up recently about violence in certain religious orders, that actually the person you trust most is not always the person who should be trusted. But religious areas can take a really big responsibility about educating, about providing safe houses, about keeping an eye on their parishioners or their temple goers or their mosque goers. So you actually get, because those people see people more regularly, support for family stresses and the wisdom of leaders, how to support vulnerable families where everybody knows each other. And the careful rehabilitation of offenders, because if people are rehabilitated too early, it's very, very dangerous. And support for women and violence in the home is so, so important among religious groups who can do so much good and equally can be make people very vulnerable. The extended family has a power to be able to support the nuclear family. They can keep an eye on things. The extended family can be a point of danger because statistically it's often the extended family that people receive some level of abuse from, but also that the extended family can give support. They can give a break for parents under stress. They can help take the children. They can actually, if they think something's going on, an elder can take somebody aside and say, what are you doing? They can go and the child, if there's one child, and sometimes in a family it's one child who's abused, not all the children. This is very often the case. One child is victimized. So the family is not seen as a problem because people don't notice that only one of the children is having bruises, is hungry, is unkempt. They just think it's that child's personality. So very importantly, extended family can help, but they can also hide because they're scared of the stigma on the family. Again, learn about your child's world and how to help them. And then again, the nuclear family, know and love your child, teach your child to feel safe with you, spend quality time listening to them, respect your child's needs, ensure your child is educated so they have a possible future. Ask for help. As a nuclear family, you need to ask for help so that you don't just end up in aggression or violence or stress. Again, protecting children, giving healthy food, love, nurture, understanding their culture, listening to the peer pressure, understanding your child's world, and giving a child a sense of self-confidence and individualism. Again, for parents, have moderate and realistic boundaries, know your child, have a respectful, warm relationship. You know, you sow the seeds that you reap in later life. You can't force respect. I teach that a lot, especially after prison, etc. You can't force respect. You can only force fear. And if you have a good relationship with your child, they're more likely to come to you. Having open discussions, using resources. And again, most importantly, children need to be protected from abusers, but they also need to be educated from becoming abusers. So we need to be teaching them to respect each other, to respect different cultures, for boys to respect girls, to learn that they cannot do things by force, and vice versa. So we mustn't forget the other side. It's not just about children's rights. We have to teach responsibilities in society as well, because we want both sides. Otherwise, you teach rights, you get proud, arrogant, rude children who think everything is for them to take. You need a compassionate society where people know that they're protected, but they also have a right and a responsibility to protect others. So these are just the last few slides, and that's it. And there's plenty of resources out there. So that's my presentation. Thank you.